Aha! Red Ruger box commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the Ruger Black Hawk pistol. So this is the anniversary edition. Still has the yellow plastic in there, the little bar. We'll just go ahead and take that out like that. Put the cylinder back in. Gotta find the sweet spot. There it is. Flat top, Ruger, Black Hawk commemoration 50th anniversary. Well, this is Fortune Cookie 45 LC coming to you from the Hot Lead Zone Express. And for those of you who have the commemorative 50th anniversary Ruger Blackhawks, you know, there's really nothing special about that commemoration 50th anniversary, because when you get to the 60th anniversary or the 70th anniversary, who cares about the 50th? No one. So I'm going to go ahead and start shooting my commemorative. I got another one that I am shooting already. I'm going to start shooting this one too. But that's not the subject of this video. With the popularity of reloading these days, we did a video recently about the special considerations or aspects to reloading for our lever action rifles. Well, let's continue that video series with the special considerations for reloading revolvers. Now, if you go to do a YouTube search on reloading for revolvers, same problem as the lever guns. It's amazing because you think after all these years that subjects have all been done. But when you do a search on reloading for revolvers, you get speed loading revolvers, how to get ammo into the revolver faster, get the empties out faster and the new ammo in faster. Well, then you do a search on reloading ammo for revolvers and you get basic reloading. How you reload all the calibers for all types of guns. But revolvers are special, as you know. Let's go into some of the special features of revolvers. Now, you know, in the early days when revolvers were first developed, the cylinder was drilled straight through. So it was the same measurement in the back as in the front in terms of diameter of the chamber. There wasn't any little shoulder in there, and that's because the ammunition was heel bullets. What that means is the bullet was the same diameter on the outside as the cartridge case. So it was straight. And there was a heel on the bullet, and the case was crimped over the heel, kind of like a .22 rimfire. .22 rimfire is the only caliber we have now that has the heel and full diameter bullet as the same as the cartridge case. But in the early days, that was true for center fires too, until the Russians showed us a better way to do it. So now what you got is a chamber that's the diameter of the case, but then there's a little shoulder in the cylinder, in the front of the cylinder, that gets smaller, and that's the bullet diameter then that gets into that, and that's called the cylinder throat. So the cylinder throat's the diameter of the bullet, but the chamber where the case is bigger. And that's the way they are designed now. No longer straight through. Well, what this causes is that if our ammo has a shorter case and the rest of it's the same case head and all that kind of thing, then you can chamber shorter cases in there and it's no problem. So for instance, a .357 Magnum will go into this cylinder just perfectly because it's chambered for .357 Magnum. But the .38 Special is the same case, just about 1/10 of an inch shorter, so that just chambers just as easily. But if you have a .38 Long Colt, It's just a little shorter case. And then you go a little shorter still, get the 38 short Colt. Those will also chamber. So the cool thing about that is the brass can be shorter and you can go ahead and reload it. Well, what kind of consideration is that? All that means is you don't have to be concerned with it, with the length. You can use any brass casing length that'll fit. So this is cool because if you get a little neck split, but the split doesn't go all the way down the body of the case, you can actually save that and trim it back and just go ahead and save all your split necks and trim them to a shorter length, and you're still in business with those brass casings. Now, of course, if 38 special cases are easily picked up at a range, you don't need to do that. But suppose there might come a day when you want to save your brass and be able to keep using it as it gets a little shorter. Well, another cool thing about revolvers is that the power of the cartridge makes no difference, because the action and functioning of the revolver is not dependent on the power of the ammunition. So not only can you have a shorter case or a longer case, you can load a very light load, or you can load a heavier load right up until the maximum of the gun that can handle is reached. And if you got a 357 Magnum, you're safe up to about 36,000 PSI. So, one consideration about reloading revolvers is the same for all reloading, and that is stay safe. Safety. And safety means when we reload according to published loading data. That's powder charges, primers used, cases used, case length, all of that kind of thing, because you don't want to exceed the maximum case length. For instance, suppose this 357 Magnum case was too long. Then it would actually fold onto the little shoulder in the chamber, and when you fired the round, the brass casing would want to get onto that shoulder, but then the bullet's coming through, and the bullet's going to smash and squash its way through there because you got the cases trying to get in there too. So when that happens, your pressures go and skyrocket, and you have an unsafe condition. So yes, you can have shorter brass casings, but you can't have longer than the maximum that's published for a 357 Magnum brass. So stay within that and you're fine. Turns out that when we shoot our straight wall cases, they don't really lengthen. You should measure to see if you're over the maximum length or not, but otherwise you don't have to. But once you establish that your brass is not longer than the overall maximum, then you're safe and ready to go. So the other aspect of safety is safe reloading practices. And we don't want to go into all that because that's a whole video on to itself. Stay with the published loading data in the manuals and use the safe reloading procedures. And safety will be fine. Now, when you reload for revolvers, you do have to be careful that your maximum overall length of your cartridge is not too long. Because if it is too long, what will happen is you'll chamber the round and the bullet will stick out the front of the cylinder. If that happens, you're going to tie up the revolving of the cylinder in the gun and you'll get a jam. So you cannot exceed the length of the front of the cylinder with your bullet. This is usually not a problem because one of the aspects of reloading for revolvers is that all the rounds need to be crimped. And most of the time that means that we need to do a roll crimp. And a roll crimp is where the case mouth is bent in to a crimping groove on the bullet in the case of cast bullets. And revolver bullets also have cannelures in jacketed bullets for you to crimp into. And if you crimp into those things, so if you do crimp into a cannelure or a crimping groove, 99% of the time you're going to be fine, for the overall length is going to be great and everything will work perfectly. But there are times when that doesn't hold water. And one of the times is when you use the long-nosed Keith bullets, like this one here. This happens to be a 358 429 cast bullet. And I'd like to say hi to Walter Bunning, because he just casted up a whole bunch of these, and we've been kind of talking together. If you haven't had a chance to check out Walter Bunning's site on YouTube, you might go ahead and do that. He's got a very calm delivery. He knows his stuff, and I find it entertaining. But anyway, the long-nosed Keith bullet, if you load it into the long 357 Magnum brass, the loaded round will actually be too long to feed. So you see here, so you see some of the ammo that we reload into our revolvers. Notice the longer nose 38 specials. If you were to load those into a 357 Magnum case, they would be very long, and some of them will be too long for the cylinder of our 357 Magnum revolvers. But what I'm doing is showing you these rounds because notice that all of them have a very good crimp in them. The two on the left are the Keith bullets reloads. And they're right up to where Elmer Keith would like them. But the next one is a Federal Hydra-Shock. Notice it's got a good crimp in the cannelure. Now the next two bullets are the round-nosed lead bullets, very popular all the way up into the 70s with law enforcement. 158 grain round-nosed lead bullets, and they're crimped nicely in those 38 specials. But then comes the 357 Magnums, and notice all of them have good firm crimps. In case you're wondering, that's a Remington 158 grain 357 Magnum cartridge in the nickel cases. And then we've got Winchester 125 grain screamers. These are the hot loaded 125 grains that the 357 Magnum was very popular with law enforcement. But then we got a couple of full metal case 142 grain Fiocchis, truncated cones. And those are kind of recreational bullets. So you see from looking at all that ammo that the crimp is very important with a revolver round. The problem with not crimping properly on a revolver cartridge is that under recoil, especially the heavy kicking calibers, the bullet can move forward and then it'll stick out the front of the cylinder and tie up the cylinder. So we do need a heavy crimp. That's one of the considerations for reloading for revolvers, is that a good crimp, and most of the time we're talking about a good roll crimp, is necessary for successful reloading of the revolver. Now, if you looked at all those bullets, you'll notice the different kinds of nose profiles. And one of the nice things about a revolver is you don't have to be concerned with the shape of the bullet nose. It can be any shape. It could be a full wad cutter. It could be a wad cutter seated out, a wad cutter that's seated even with the top of the case mouth. It can be a semi-wad cutter that's very aggressive, has a wide knee plat so that there's not a lot of taper in the semi-wad cutter. Those will work fine. It can be a truncated cone that's got a big knee plat or a small knee plat. It can be a hollow point truncated cone. It can be a hollow point round nose bullet, round nose bullets, flat nose, round nose bullets. All of those will feed just fine. Not only that, but bullet hardness doesn't make any difference, because you could put a soft bullet in, you could put a hard cast bullet in, you put a jacketed bullet in, and all it does is drop in, no problem feeding. So the hardness is not a problem. But isn't this video about problem considerations, that if we don't take care of these things, we'll have trouble? Yes. That brings us back to the crimp. So you see, what a roll crimp does is it rolls the case mouth into a crimping groove or a cannelure. So you got to check your bullet. A revolver bullet that's jacketed will have a cannelure. Is that a deep cannelure, or is it a shallow cannelure? Is it just a little kind of a valley type of crimping groove instead of a cannelure? Some plated bullets actually have a little line that's a little dent into the plated bullet, and that's where you crimp. When it comes to cast bullets, we're crimping into shallow grease grooves. In a case of tumble lube bullets, that are the little small micro grooves that Lee gives us, we can crimp into those. We can crimp into a fine Keith crimping groove, which is tapered. In other words, there's a groove that's tapered, and then it's got a sharp shoulder there so that you crimp into this thing. Why is that important? Because if you're shallow in your cantilure, then the geometry of your crimp can't be like this, like the heavy crimps you saw on some of those rounds that we showed you, where the case mouth is bent in quite a bit. If your cantilure is really shallow, you won't get that bend. And then the important thing is, if you crimp it in the top of the cantilure, the middle, or the beginning of the cantilure, the bottom, makes a difference in the geometry of your crimp. If you don't crimp it in a good geometry, like for instance, if you crimp it into a cantilure too close to the bottom of the cantilure, what will happen is you can't get that bend in, and then what happens is, instead of the case mouth bending in, the case body starts to go out like that. So instead of your case being straight on the side wall, you get a little bend in there like this. And that causes problems when you chamber your round. So what do we have so far? And that is, stay safe with reloading manual reloading data published, and also accepted reloading procedures. That gives you safety. Then you want to watch the maximum overall length of your brass so it's not over the maximum. And then you want to watch the maximum overall length of your cartridge so it doesn't stick out the front of the cylinder. Those are the considerations we talked about. And then we talked about the crimp. The fact that you've got to have a good roll crimp, and the roll crimp needs to be done in accordance to the type of crimping groove or cantilure you have. Now in your Lee die set, a very handy die is the Lee factory crimp die. And what it does is it has a carbide ring that gets rid of those bulges that we talked about. When you crimp like this and you cause a little bulge, that can cause a problem, but this will remove that little bulge right there without sizing the whole thing. You don't want to do that, but it'll remove bulges, and so that's one of the things about the Lee factory crimp die that we really like, and it very simply takes care of the problem. Well, what is that problem? And we'll just demonstrate by using our Smith & Wesson 686. When you take a round that you've reloaded and you chamber it, you should hear a snick like that. It should drop in with a snick like that. And then when you want to get it out, you go like this and it drops right out of the chamber without any problem at all. What happens is when shooters don't get that little snick, they wind up going like this with their fingers to kind of give those cases a little push. You shouldn't have to do that. Reloading considerations means that when you drop your rounds in, you get a little snick and they drop right out. And our fine Lee factory crimp die goes ahead and gives us that. By the way, Lee sells these dies separately so that you can go ahead and match this die up with any kind of reloading die set you have to give you the benefit of the Lee factory crimp die. So our last consideration of reloading for revolvers is to know how big your cylinder throats are on this end of the cylinder. If this dimension is too big, you're going to have a problem shooting cast bullets, because you need cast bullets that are 0.001 inch bigger than this dimension. If you don't have that, you can get leading inaccuracy and all kinds of problems like that. Cast bullets are 358 inches or 359 inches. What that means is this dimension should be like 357 or 358. And if you have that, you're great. gotten to the point where whenever I'm looking at a prospective revolver to buy, that I go ahead and mic with a caliper these cylinder dimensions. And if I get a measurement that's like, instead of 357 or 358, I'm getting 360 or 361, don't buy that revolver. Very simple. Why look for problems? The reason why revolvers have big cylinder throats is that they're designed to shoot jacketed bullets. Because jacketed bullets don't matter. The jacketed bullet goes through there, and because it's jacketed, the gas that's cutting by there will not cause the lead to go ahead and deposit lead there in the first inch and a half of your barrel, because there's a jacketed bullet. So the jacketed bullet goes into the forcing cone, gets squeezed down, and fits into the groove diameter of the barrel, and you're in business. But the problem with cast bullets is you've got that leading in this part of the barrel. After about maybe 10 rounds, you're going to have problems getting accuracy. It's going to go downhill with that leading happening, that fouling. So the consideration is that we need to know what the measurement is on our cylinder throats and get our bullets to be 0.001 inch bigger if we're shooting cast bullets. If we're shooting jacketed, then the jacketed bullets for the 357 Magnum or 38 Special would be somewhere around 357 or 358. Fine for reloading this revolver. Well, you'll hear a lot of advice that you should slug your barrel and use bullets that are 0.001 inch bigger than your groove diameter. And that's fine policy for rifles and automatic pistols. But for revolvers, there's a special consideration for the cylinder throat. And if you want to know more about this subject, I've got separate videos on it. But it's not in the scope of this video that's talking about considerations, other than the fact that just go with 0.001 inch bigger than your cylinder throat if you're shooting cast bullets, which is a very good thing to do, by the way. But that's more subject matter. If you're only going to shoot jacketed bullets, you don't have to be concerned with any of that. Just go ahead and load your jacketed bullets. So shooters and reloaders, Fortune Cookie 45 LC, signing off on this video. We'll see you in the next one.